All right, this is going to be our exercise 3 demonstration. Um, the recording from class didn't record my audio, so I'm doing this from home. So I'm going to try and make it as similar as possible to what we went over in class. I'll just be following the instructions step by step. One thing I'll note is I do not have SketchUp 2024 on my personal computer. I'm just working in 2021. Um, Not very many differences. Really, the only difference that we should experience here is just the graphics. These tools are looking a little bit different. Some colors differences from 2024, but we shouldn't have any issues going back and forth demonstrating on 2021 and you doing it in 2024. Should be pretty much the same, just looks a little bit different. So let's go ahead and get started. This is exercise 3, corresponds with part 2 of chapter 4, starting at the bottom of page 53, where model a table begins. So let's go ahead and just jump into the exercise. Step number 1, we're going to model the tabletop. Starting at the origin, create a rectangle that is 6 feet along the red axis by 3 feet along the green axis by 2 inches along the blue axis. So let's go ahead and start there. So we're starting at the origin. Remember, that's the place where all of the axes intersect. So I'm going to press R on my keyboard to pull up the rectangle tool. I'm going to use that inference engine to make sure that I am indeed starting at the origin. Click there. Start to pull my mouse away to start this triangle, and I'm going to type in the dimensions starting with the red axis, 6 foot, comma, 3 foot, enter. I'm zoomed out pretty far here. We can take a look just to double check that our measurements are correct with the tape measure tool. So I'll click on one endpoint, come hover over this other one. Yep, 6 feet. Check this one, 3 feet. Perfect. And then we need to extrude it 2 inches up. So that's using the push-pull tool, P on your keyboard. We'll grab this surface, just click, start to pull up and type 2 enter for 2 inches. Remember, if it's inches, you do not need to specify the units. And then we are going to make a group of this tabletop. So I'm going to select all of the geometry, either with a selection window, or you can triple click to grab all of the geometry that's touching each other. So once you've got that selected, right click and make a group. And then we're going to move the tabletop up 28 inches so that the top of the table is at 30 inches. We've got a 2-inch thick tabletop, move it up 28 inches. It should give us 30 inches at the top. I'm going to hit M on my keyboard for move, grab one of my corners here, start to pull up along the blue axis. If you're having trouble finding that blue axis, you might just need to orbit around a little bit until you can get a better view. But once you find that blue axis, you can hold down Shift to make sure that you're locked in there to that blue axis. And then we're going to do 28 inches. I'll type, oops, I lost it. 20, no, it doesn't like that. 28, enter for 28 inches. We can take a look from the top of the table to that origin point. Yep, 2'6" is 30 inches. Step number 2, we're going to draw some guidelines. Orbit under the table. So we can either just orbit and look at it like this, or you might like just being able to look straight on at the bottom of this table. That might be a little bit more helpful. We did learn our standard views where you can look at top, bottom, left, right, front, and back, all those good things. I've got them already up here on my toolbar. They'll look a little bit different in 2024, but you can also find them under Camera, Standard Views, and we can look at the bottom. And now that's oriented us so that we're looking at the bottom of the table here. And you can also turn into that parallel projection for more of that two-dimensional look. And this will ensure that you're modeling flat on the bottom surface of your table. So you might find that a little bit more helpful. I personally like modeling in a perspective mode, so that's more of how I'm going to look at it, but test both out, see which one works better for you. Okay, so we're going to use the tape measure tool to create some guidelines that are 2 inches inward from each of the 4 edges of the tabletop. So I'm hitting T on my keyboard to pull up that tape measure tool. And then to create guidelines, we click on a modeled line already in the model. So we can click on the edge of our tabletop here. Just click, we're not dragging, start to move inward. And what was it, 2 inches? Yep, and I hit to enter to move in that 2 inches. And I'm just going to do that on each of the 4 sides. Okay, step number 3, we're going to draw the top of one of the table legs. So with the rectangle tool activated, click R on your keyboard. Click on one intersection of guidelines, move your mouse inward, and type 4,4 to create a rectangle that is 4 inches by 4 inches. So start wherever you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and start at the one that's closest to the origin here. And note that I'm not inside of my tabletop group. This is still its own group. I'm kind of back in main model space. I don't want to create my table leg inside of my tabletop group. That kind of defeats the purpose of separating geometry from each other. So we're in our main model space here. Rectangle tool, find that intersection with the inference engine. Click on that intersection, move your mouse outward, and 4,4, enter. You can double check with the tape measure tool. 4 inches, 4 inches. Good to go there. I also put in here just a different way that you can create a rectangle to an exact size. I'm going to Control Z to undo that rectangle so that we can see the other method. You can just go ahead and draw a rectangle any size, and then if you immediately type the dimensions after you create that rectangle, it'll automatically adjust. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to find that intersection again. I'm just going to create a random rectangle, way too big, but then I'm going to immediately type 4,4, enter, and it just automatically adjusts, resizes to that 4 inch by 4 inch square, whichever way you prefer. All right, step number 4, we're going to make a component. So we want to make a component out of the table leg rather than a group. So we made a group of the tabletop. I don't plan to create any more tabletops. I don't plan to make copies of it. So in this instance, a group is okay. For the table leg, however, I'm going to have 4 of those, and I want to be able to change them all if I decide I want to make changes to one of them, because I want them all to stay the same. So in that case, a component is a good idea. So I'm going to select the square. I want to grab the surface of the square as well as all of the lines of the square. You can do that by double clicking the surface. That grabs the surface and all of its edges. And then I'll right click and make a component. We're going to name our component table leg. Make sure replace selection with component is checked and create. Starting off, Making your components as early as possible, your groups and your components as early as possible is going to be helpful, because it's going to be a lot harder later on to try and pick and choose which geometry you want to go inside of that component or group if all the geometry is just together, sticking together, kind of a free-for-all. So I like to try and make those groups and components as early as possible to keep my model nice and organized. Step number 5, we're going to copy the component to all 4 corners of the table. So I have my component selected still. I'm going to hit M for move. And then I want to click Control on the keyboard to activate copy. And we're going to find a point of this component so that we can be really accurate as we copy it to the other intersections. So for this intersection over here, it's going to make sense for me to grab this corner. Oops, ignore that little rotate thing. SketchUp kind of likes to do that sometimes. We just want the move tool, thank you. Okay, so I grabbed that, then find that intersection and click to finish. We'll copy it across over here. So for this intersection, this endpoint is going to make the most sense. So I'll grab that endpoint. Oops, I forgot to hit Control. Make sure that plus sign is there next to your cursor so that you're copying, not just moving. There we go. Slide it across, find that intersection, and finish there. Last one. I'm going to grab this corner here after I hit Control. No, thank you. We don't want to rotate. Sometimes if you just zoom in a little bit closer, that makes it easier. SketchUp's got a mind of its own sometimes. And we're going to go find that intersection. Perfect. Now we've got our component copied on each of the intersections. So we'll have 4 table legs. Okay, where are we? Step number 6. Make the square a block. So we're going to double click into one of the components. It doesn't matter which one you choose. Since it's a component, any change we make to one is going to change all of them. So I'm just going to go for this one since it's still selected, but you can do any one and it's going to give you the same result. So I'll double click to enter my edit mode. You can see everything else has grayed out. And I've got this bounding box around my component, so I am in edit mode. And I'm going to use the push-pull tool to bring the square down 4 inches. So I'll find that surface here, just click on it, start to pull my mouse down, and type 4, enter. You can double check it with our tape measure tool. Yep, 4 inches. And yep, all of them changed. We set up our component correctly. If they didn't all change, maybe you made a group instead of a component, but they should all change if you've made a component. Okay, step number 7, add the lower part of the leg. While you're still inside your component editing box, so we didn't click out of it, navigate to the underside of this extruded square. So we're going to be looking at this surface that we just extruded out. Create guidelines 1 inch inward from each of the 4 sides. So I'm going to use the tape measure tool for that. For guidelines, I click on a modeled line first, move my mouse inward, and type 1, enter for that 1 inch. Each of the 4 sides, grab the edge, pull inward, 1 inch. Okay. and trace over those guidelines with either the pencil or rectangle tool to create a square that's 2 inches by 2 inches. So even though we've created these guidelines, these aren't actual modeled geometry. So while it may look like you've got a square here, we don't actually have any lines for that square. So you can use either your pencil line tool or your rectangle tool. I'm going to go ahead and use the rectangle tool. Make sure we find those intersections over across to the other one. And now you can see once I've made that inner square, I've got two different surfaces that are made because SketchUp sees that we now have a new boundary edge, and so a new surface comes out. And then we're going to push-pull this new square down 24 inches. Use P on my keyboard for push-pull. Grab that surface here. And we'll pull it down 24, enter. Let's take a look. Yep, and we should, the bottom of our table leg should now line up with kind of our ground plane. We can take a look in our standard views. If we go to one of the side views, yep, mine looks nice and lined up with where that axis is. Alrighty, step number 8, we're going to taper the table leg. So still inside of your component here, your table leg component, we're going to use the scale tool to taper this leg down. So we're going to end up still with that 2 inch by 2 inch starting surface up here. And we're going to taper it down by 75%, and we'll be left with a square that's 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So to do that, we are going to select this bottom surface with its edges. So I'm going to double click that surface to grab the surface and the edges. We're going to use the scale tool, so hit S on your keyboard. You'll see those grips come up. And then we want to scale about the center so that all of the table is tapering down together towards the center. We don't want a lopsided table leg that tapers to the left or to the right. So to get that scaling about the center, it lets you know down here, you hit the control key. You just click the control key, you don't need to hold it. And once you do, that red grip comes up in the center. That lets you know that you're going to be scaling around the center point. I grab one of the corner grips because that one gives you the uniform scale. The side grips are kind of a little, they can give you kind of cattywampus. So we're going to grab the corner here, start to move inwards. You can see everything is tapering or scaling towards that center point. And I'm going to type 0.75 for 75%. Enter. And we should be left with a square that's 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So we've got that nice tapering effect. This area up here was unaffected. It's still at 2 inch by 2 inch. We came down to this area of 1.5 inches. And all of our table legs are looking the same because edits to one component changes them all. Okay, we can click out of that component now. We're done with our table legs. We're going to move on to the apron pieces, kind of the support structures between the legs. So I'm going to start maybe at this front apron. You can start wherever you'd like. But we want to navigate to kind of the top outside edge of one of our table legs. And again, we're outside of the component. We're back in our main model space so that we can keep geometry nice and separated. So starting at the top outside edge of the table leg, draw a rectangle that is 1 inch wide by 4 inches tall. So I'll hit R on my keyboard for the rectangle tool, find that end point of your table leg, and find it so that you're on the face of the table leg. If you're having trouble, it's trying to create rectangles that are not on the surface that you're wanting, you can use the arrow keys. Left and right toggles between the red and green axes, and then the up arrow will give you the blue. So if you're having some trouble, use those arrow keys to find the face that you want. And then from here, we'll type in our 1, 4, enter. And then with this new rectangle we've got here, we will push-pull the rectangle to, is it coming with me? There it is. Push-pull the rectangle to the opposite table leg. And we can make sure that we line it up exactly with the face of the table leg by hovering over the face, or you can even find an edge that you want to align to, and then click to finish there. And it should be nice and flush. And then we can make a component of this apron. So you could have made your component when we made that first rectangle 1 inch by 4 inches. Like we did with the table legs, we made the component right off the bat. This one, it's still going to be pretty easy for me to select all of this geometry since everything else is already isolated into its own group or component. So whenever I triple click my apron, it should just select the apron geometry for me because everything else is nice and isolated. So SketchUp knows that these are the only items that are actually touching each other. So once you have that apron selected, right click and make a component. We're going to make a copy of this. The apron's going to go to the other side of the table as well, so a component is a great idea here rather than a group. I'm going to call this my long apron. If you did the short side first, just call it short apron. Replace selection with component is checked. Hit create. Okay, and then we just need to copy this to the other side of the table. So again, I'm going to grab a point that makes sense where I can be really accurate as I copy it across. So maybe this top end point here, the inner one, M for move, Control for copy. Don't be afraid to scroll in, make sure that you are indeed grabbing that end point and copy it across to line up with this end point. Okay, then we're just basically going to do the same thing for the short apron. So I'm going to navigate again to where I can see this top outside corner. Make another rectangle here. Again, I'm not inside any components or groups. Back in that main model space, creating another rectangle 1 by 4 inches. Use the push-pull tool to stretch this apron. Oops, a little funky. Across the other side. Make sure you're aligning with that face. And click to finish. And then again, everything else is nice and isolated, so I should be able to triple click and grab just my apron here so that I can right click and make a component. I'm going to call this one my short apron. Replace selection with component. Great. Same thing, copying it across to the other side. So go ahead and find a good endpoint. M for move, Control for copy. Be precise with grabbing that endpoint. And align it to this outside corner. Okay. That brings us to our final step. Delete all of the guidelines. We don't want to see all those messy lines. We want a nice, pretty finished product. So we go up to Edit and Delete Guides. That gets rid of all of the guidelines and guide points all at once. And then we're going to make it a little fancy just by adding a shadow. For that, we'll go up to View and check Shadows to turn them on. Now you got a nice little shadow. And that's it. Thanks.